coined the term African American. I don't want to be called African American.
Why is that?
I'm not African.
My grandmother was a full-blooded Iroquois.
As you're aware, in 1912, Dr. Walter Plecker became the first director of the Bureau of Vital Statistics. But he was part of the eugenics movement, which was a movement about creating one race of people, which was white, and everything else was put in a pot, as Tina Marie would say, and stir it up and call colored.
But basically, when he was the registrar for the Bureau of Vital Records, he changed the names of Indian people in Southampton County.
Exactly.
Their race from Indian to Negro or colored.
So it was referred to as colored.
The most significant thing here is to reveal the much greater amounts of Native American ancestry that are present within the African American population than most people realize, because they might have been misled by the use of terms like mulatto and also people of color.
Some of us started here in this land. Everybody wasn't brought over from Africa.
It comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. That the Indians were you.
What kind of face you got, Bill? That Mandinka face.
Mandinka? What foodstuffs that you talking about? That's African. I ain't no African.
Well, I'm Mandinka. We're proud people.
And I'm American. I'm American. I'm American. I was born here. My mammy and my daddy was born here. And my daddy's daddy. And I ain't no African.
You talk more shit than a little bit. Back to Mother Africa. That's bullshit. Without question, we are all black Americans. You do not know a goddamn thing about Africa. I am from Detroit, Motown. So you can watch Tootsie your monkey ass back to Africa if you want to.
Happy Educational Friday. How y'all doing? I was struggling with the volume, but we're here. How are y'all? I hope y'all are doing well. Happy Educational Friday. Shout out to everybody in the building. Get the lights up. Sorry, y'all. I'm still getting over that sickness I had a couple of weeks ago. The cold is the cough is still kind of lingering, but neither here nor there. We are here for Educational Friday, and we got a show today. So y'all come on in and get the likes up on the video. I forgot what I was going to say, but I will say this week we will be talking about slavery and the Black Americans who owned slavery and the misconception around that. You know what I'm saying? Because, see, we were so caught up on the root story about slavery only being about working for free and being beaten, hung, that we see slavery, we see Black people or mulatto, and then we automatically assume the worst, when in fact, that wasn't the case. And if you truly understand the system of slavery, while those things did happen, yes, the slavery came with the abuse and the hanging and the raping, all that stuff happened, yes. However, if you understood the actual institution of slavery, then you'll know that it really was an institution of labor, more or less like a working system than what you saw on the movies, okay? So what we're going to talk about today, and it was a class, yes, it was also classism. It was also a class status. Your status could be slave. We're going to talk about that today as well. So what we're going to deal with today, and shout out to everybody in the building. If you're new to Educational Friday, all we do here is unlearn the stuff we learned. We be finding new stuff, and we were like, oh, snap, I didn't know that. We learn it together. I am a forever student. So most of the time on Educational Fridays, we really be learning together, okay? I'm not going to get on here and act like I'm no teacher. I ain't no teacher. I ain't no educator. I'm just here so we can put our minds together and figure this stuff out, okay? But with that being said, there's a large misconception around that. And when you guys start to doing your genealogy, because I hope you're doing it, Black America especially, I hope you are doing your genealogy. You're going to run across, if possible, not everybody, but possibly, you're going to run across some statuses on the census when you use the census records, and you're going to see family, and you're going to see some that are slaves, okay? And you need to understand what that means when you see that. Remember, genealogy is the way to reparations. It's the way to make the right or wrong. It's a way to make the wrong right. Okay, so y'all also please make sure you're grounding, meditating, praying, whatever it is you need to do to connect to your higher self or the Most High God. Please tap within. Don't go without. You already dealing with church. You're already dealing with all this other stuff. Go within. Okay, so we're gonna talk about that, y'all, today. We're gonna be speaking about dang, where's my cursor? I'll use this one. We're gonna be speaking about the institution of slavery as we know it versus what it really is. Okay, so y'all get the likes up on the video, subscribe to the channel, and shout out to everybody in the building. We do this every Friday, at least every Friday I can. Basically what we're doing is we're trying to figure out what's really real. Okay, and also to do research on your own stuff. Please, everybody do everything you hear from anybody, always do your own research. Okay, I want to start with the census records. Okay, let's start with the census records. Let's talk about slavery. Let's talk about slavery and what it was and what we thought it was. When you go and you think about or you talk about slavery, the first thing I notice is all over the world, people always focus on the transatlantic slave history document or whatever the case may be. If you put in slavery in any Google search, I don't care where you are in the world, more than likely you're going to see images of Black American slavery. It kind of makes it seem as if Black Americans were the only ones enslaved, or at least at worst. Now, I'm not saying who was worse or who was better. I was not there. Neither was none of us. All we know is what they say. However, the reason why every time you see slavery or you Google slavery and it always comes up with Black American slaves, or they'll show you stuff like this video showing this lady
you work the
at the work. Look,
you have, I ain't got nothing. You don't know nothing about working, do you?
See, they show you these things, right? Mind you, this lady is talking about work, and you got to be careful. I told y'all this before. The captions a lot of times are misleading. They will tell you slavery ended all the way back in 1865. A lot of times the video don't match the titles, but because you're already going off the title, you go with the move in the video. However, I'm just saying they always show you negative imagery of slavery because they want to, first of all, keep you enslaved here. Okay, they gotta enslave you here. If you know and believe that you are a slave, then guess what? You are sold. You're a slave. If you all, it's kind of like the Christian mind. People who grew up in church heavy, they have a mindset that's like you can't waver. They don't waver with it. You know what I'm saying? Because that's all they see is one track. It's the same thing with the slavery narrative. If you believe that you were a Kunta Kinte and your ancestors were a Kunta Kinte, then guess what you are going to be in 2025 as you walk amongst the world? Kunta Kinte. So they have to enslave you here. That's why most imagery comes from American slavery. But the fact of the matter is, if you understood the economics, or if you understood slavery, you understood it was about economics, okay? If you understood the Civil War, you understood that was about what? Economics. I'm telling you, wars happen for 3, 4, 5 things. It ain't for multitudes of things. So figure into the slavery narrative. Whenever you hear slavery, you just think, oh my God, it's the most horrible thing, right? Now, when you start to do your genealogy, one of the main things you're going to have to look into is your census, the United States Census, okay? A lot of y'all want to know where to go find this stuff. UScensus.gov, okay? And it'll give you the census records for all people that was living in America every 10 years, I want to say, from 1790. I think like that, the first census. Don't get me the line. I'm sorry, y'all. Hold on. So it's going to go back and it's going to count, or it's going to tell you about the people who were living in America during this time. I went all the way back to the 1800s. No, I want to say the 1800s, late 1800s in the census, or the early 1800s, I'm sorry, on the census. You're going to see, when you look at the census records, you're going to see at the time, the way it was set up was you had a head of household, and then you have family, wife and children. They all had occupations. You can even see it on the most recent censuses, right? They typically do a head of household. They do the same thing on your taxes. And then the people that fall under your household. Well, in the time when the slavery situation was going on, you got to understand there are a lot of people who had the status of slave. Slavery was an occupation. Slavery was a status. Slavery was a lot of things, okay? And what do I mean by status? For instance, let's say I'm not a free person. However, I marry a free husband or a free man. We get married. He can't buy my freedom. Or maybe he can't buy me, or maybe he can't get my freedom, but he can buy me as a slave. If I were to have children with this man, then guess what he's going to put me down on the census as? He's going to be head of household. I'm going to be his slave. And the little kids are going to be his slaves as well. Not because we're actual slaves all the time. Simply because status-wise, we have to be labeled as slaves because we're not freemen or freed men, okay? So you got to keep that in mind. Just because you see slave don't necessarily mean your ancestor was on there with some chips, some whips and chains getting the head knocked off the shoulder, okay? Now, another status or another reason why you'll see S for slave on the census is because slavery was an occupation. You hear all those stories about people who came out of slavery, saved up their money, and they went into business and bought this land and did that and the third. That is because yes, they were getting paid. I'm not saying everybody was getting paid, but it was a form of indentured servitude. Now, were they getting paid the best money? Absolutely not. Pennies on the dollar even for a lot of them. However, they were able to save money because they were making money. It was a job. A lot of people worked on their own plantations to get their land back. A lot of people needed jobs and was like, yo, I need to go work on these people's plantation to get this money to pay these bills. It was different. The reason you see slavery and you automatically think the worst is because of Hollywood. The movie Roots. That's it. That's all. Between the movie Roots and education from the 60s on beyond and further after that, between the movie Roots and education, that is the reason why you believe that slavery is always has a negative connotation. And I'm not saying it always has a positive, or at any point does it have a positive. However, you always think the worst because of what you've been indoctrinated to believe about it. But that's just to keep you in 2025 mentally enslaved. This is why when we talk about rebuilding, what happens if they do a Tulsa? That's the mental enslavement. They don't need to put the chains on your arms. Fact, they right here. Okay? Now, I want to show y'all a little bit of the census record so you can see exactly what you're looking at. All right. It says, using census records for Black family history before 1865. If you do, and please, whenever you see African-American, know what it is. You know we're not African-Americans. But let's just go with it. It says, if you do African-American genealogy, you no doubt heard about the Brick Wall of 1870. That's the first year or the year of the first post-emancipated U.S. federal census. Before 1870, we had to rely on records from the era of slavery, when the majority of African Americans were treated as property. That's a lie. It's hard to think about it, and it's hard to find records. Remember, status and treatment are two different things. Status and treatment are two different things. Now, I'm not saying that people weren't treated bad, and I'm not saying Black people weren't treated bad. To say that the majority were, that is a lie, because we had too many successful Black people in the South during this time. We've already talked about it. If you're new to the channel, do your research or go check out some of the old lives we did, okay? Now, moving forward, it says, let me scroll down. U.S. Census. All right, it says you can access the census at a number of online sites. In my opinion, the best is Ancestry.com. That's where I use to get all of my census stuff, right? It says it is expensive to buy. We don't need all that. When you use the census, it is important to understand a few things about it. First, the U.S. federal census was taken every 10 years, starting in 1790. Second, it did attempt to count every single person except Native Americans every time it was taken. Now, let me stop right here because I need to explain this part. We all know Native Americans are not American Indians. They are the $5 footlongs. The reason why they're not counting Native Americans and now they're making this census and counting all these Black Negro people is because during this time, they're taking our identity as the American Indian and they're giving it to the Native American. Now, when they give us our identity as the American Indian, when they give our identity to the Native American, now we become Negroes. A lot of people, our ancestors, were not counted on the census. Why? They called those people wild Indians. Why did they call them wild Indians, boo? Because they wasn't going with the program. Them was the ones who, when the white folks came around there, they knew not to come back around there because they might get popped. Them was the wild ones. So a lot of our ancestors never even made it to the census. It's no different in 2025. How often do you fill out the census? You get it? Also, back then, keep this in mind, we were not putting down this information. It was a clear person who was a worker of the American government who would come by and they would eye you. And if you look light-skinned with some decent hair to them, okay, you mulatto. Oh, you look like you got a little tan on you. You Negro. You get it? So, okay, now I want to move forward. It says, enslaved people were counted in every census from 1790 to 1860. However, slaves were never named. They were also listed under their enslaver's name. Free people of color, on the other hand, were treated pretty much like whites in the census every year. So you had slaves and you had free people of color. Remember, this is status. It's kind of like having low class, middle class, high class. Does that make sense? This is what we're talking about it in this capacity. That's what we're talking about. When they say they had free people of color, and remember this people of color thing is very tricky. But for the most part, we're talking about status here as it pertains to the census, because census is about status, okay? That's what they want to know. Who are you and what you doing? It says third, the format and questions of the census changed almost every census year. From 1790 to 1840, only the head of household was named. In those years, all of the people in the household were counted and grouped by certain criteria: sex, age, color, freedom status, etc., which varied by year. Because of this format, these early census returns are of very limited value for information about anyone except heads of household. But note that if your ancestor was a head of household, black or white, female or male, he or she should be in the census in these years. Heavy on the word should. Okay. Now I want to go over here. Wait, matter of fact, I think they have a copy of a census in here so you can see it. Hold on. Here you go. Let me scroll down some more. I thought they had another copy. I can see if I can blow it up. Can I blow this up? Let me see if I can make the page bigger. Y'all like the video, please. And thank you. I want to see if I can make the page bigger. That way, because I don't know if y'all could absolutely see it and it won't let me click on it. So it's not. Okay. If you can't see this, I'll try to make me smaller so you can see it a little better. But basically, the way it worked was, and I got my census in here as well. It was normally a name, right? I can't even read that crap. But it was normally a name. It normally asks for your age, your occupation, and it'll normally be who all is up under your household. So, for instance, you see how this is the first name? This is probably the head of household. That's probably the spouse. And those are probably the children, okay? Now, in one of these categories, I think this is color, so that's black. I want to say, I can't see what this status is, and I can't see what that status is. But as far as the number, you see the number there. But in certain statuses on the census moving forward, you're going to see slave, and it's going to be status. Matter of fact, can I see if it's on here? I can hardly see this. Maybe it does have the slave status on here. It's just that I can hardly see it. It says in these documents, each slave owner is listed by name and then his or her slaves. Okay, hold on. We got clarity. Scroll up. Hold on, let me scroll up. We got clarity. In these documents, each slave owner is listed by name, and then his or her slaves are listed, not by name, but by age, sex, and color, either black or mulatto, i.e. mixed race. If the slave schedulers are mainly useful for, if the slave schedules are mainly useful for, 1, helping to confirm the location of enslaved people I've already found in other records, and 2, gathering information about enslavers and slave holdings. Now remember, this is big business. This is money. These people want to see who all slave owners and who all making money so they can do what, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Tax. Because remind you, this is all free money prior to the Civil War. This is what the North wanted the beef with the South so much about. They like, y'all niggas down there getting money hand over fist, my nigga. Y'all ain't paying into no tithes. Y'all ain't paying into no taxes. Nigga, we need some of that. And the South was like, nah, my nigga, I can't do it. Now, let's be clear. When you do your census and you do your genealogy, you gonna find that there was a lot of people, black people in your family that fought on the side of the South. That should tell you more than what you need to know, that what them people told you about history had to be wrong. Because this is what they want us to believe. They want us to believe all the black people that fought on the side of the South were slaves and they were forced to. That's a lie. There were black people in the South who had interest. They had land. They had slaves, which were workers. It was almost like being a business owner. And I'm not taking away from the abuse that happened during slavery and the horrible things that happened to some of our ancestors. But there was a flip side to that. It wasn't all that. Okay? So with that being said, there was a lot at stake if you were in the South. I know I have family who fought in the Civil War on the side of the South. And when you do your genealogy, you'll see that you do too. If your family owned land, guess what? They probably was fighting on the side of the South. More than likely, this is just my theory, more than likely, the black people who went up north and fought on the side of the North were the lower class blacks, the people who didn't have a lot of money, the people who didn't own land. You see what I'm saying? They had nothing to lose. They indentured service down south with no money, little to nothing. All they got is $5 in a dream. It would be more appetizing to get those black people to come up north and help fight, because why would I leave my land to fight against the people from my land? Does that make sense? So be careful with that. When you go do your genealogy, if you see slave, do not panic. Do not think, oh my God, my ancestor was just the most horrible person inside of the Mississippi. How could they own slaves? I see a lot of content creators do that. Tariq Nasheed, I've seen him do that. I've seen Dr. Umar do that. And like even people who claim they're American Indian. Oh, that means y'all people own slaves. If you truly understood the real system of slavery thing, you would know that it wasn't always, I ain't gonna say it wasn't like that, but it wasn't always like that. Here you go. Let me show y'all. It says United States 1860 slave schedules, right? Census slave schedules. Now it looked like, okay, remember we saw from the last article we just read, it said that they would just basically have the name of the person and then they wouldn't even name the people under it. It'll just be marked for how many people you have under you. So as you can see, this one, Gillespie, or whoever this is, whatever this person, Elizabeth Gillespie, this is a woman, 42. Oh no, that's a male. It's a male, 42. Why is his name Elizabeth? Maybe I'm reading it wrong. Okay, he's a male, 42, black, but these are all the people under his family. Now, these could be actual workers, or it could literally just be the status of slave. Remember this when you're doing your genealogy. Everybody who owned slaves wasn't bad. As a matter of fact, you'll find that a lot of black people bought slaves just to help them free themselves. Okay? So don't get it twisted when you see that. Hold on. It was something on here I want to show y'all. It was something I saw. If not, and here's another bigger picture of that census that you'll see. You'll see the head of household, and then whoever is under that, they don't need no names. All we need to know is how many, 1, how old, 16, what is it, male, black. You get it? 5 years old, male, black. Another one, 45 years old, female, black. So that means that must be a sister or a cousin. Here's another one, 40, female, black. 35, female, black. Remember, back then we were communal. We lived together. You get it? We lived together, and it was okay. So they didn't need to put all the information on there because they felt like all we needed to know was for head count who all is over here. I want to read y'all this article. Now, this article is called "Why My Black Family Members." What is it called? Why my black ancestors are listed as slaves. Okay, I found this little portion in the article that I want to share with y'all. It says, it is reasonable to assume that 42% of the free black slave owners who owned just one slave probably owned a family member to protect that person, as did many other black slave owners who owned only slightly larger number of slaves. As Woodson put it in 1924's Free Negro Owners of Slaves in the United States in 1830, the census record shows that the majority of the Negro owners of slaves were such from the point of view of philanthropy. It says in many instances, the husband purchased the wife or vice versa. Slaves of Negroes were in some cases the children of a free father who had purchased his wife. If he did not thereafter emancipate the mother, as so many such husbands failed to do, his own children were born his slaves and were thus reported to the numerators. Does that make sense? Now remember, this is a story for another day. At one point in time in history, a lot of our statuses came off the backs of who our mothers were, not our fathers. This would be why it was this way back then. I can be a free male, but if I don't buy the ownership of my wife, then everything come from my wife is a slave. If my wife is a slave, all of her children are slaves. Remember, we've been taught under patriarchy that everything falls under the father, but this shows that couldn't have been true. Because if the father couldn't afford to buy the wife's freedom, then every child born under that father, even though he's a free person and allegedly head of household, every child born from that woman's loins is a slave. Okay? So it goes on to say, moreover, Woodson explains, benevolent Negroes often purchase slaves to make their lot easier by granting them freedom from a nominal sum, or by permitting them to work it out on liberal terms. In other words, these black slave owners, the clear majority, cleverly used the system of slavery to protect their loved ones. That's good news. Now, we all know it wasn't all good, but what I'm telling you is a lot of black people who understood the system used it to their benefit. They would have people. Yeah, I'll buy her. And when they buy these black people, just like we would do because we have hearts for each other, look, I'm going to pay you X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to work you X, Y, and Z till you can get your freedom. And then after that, you buy the freedom of your people, and then y'all go off and do your own thing. That was very prevalent back then, but they never talk about it because they need you mentally enslaved so that all you'll think about is Kuta Kinte, getting hit across the back. When you see slavery on your census, do not fret. I'm not saying you had the best people. Just do your research into these topics because what you'll see is a lot of times it ain't what you think it was. Okay? I think I read that one. I want to show y'all another thing because after this, I'm going to show y'all a video so that y'all can see it. Okay? Just to understand a little bit more about the census, right? National Archives and Records Administration. This is an actual document. It says African Americans in the federal census 1790 to 1930. The federal government conducts a census every 10 years. The National Archives maintains a microfilm record of each available census of free enslaved populations arranged by state, county, and enumeration division. The federal constitution stipulated that a slave counted as 3/5 of a person for the purposes of taxation and apportionment of the House of Representatives. Now let's be clear, you guys. Let's really be clear. They did the census every 10 years, right? People being counted as 3/5 of a man was a catch, and I ain't gonna say a catch-22. It was kind of like a good and a bad, right? It was bad, obviously, for people, because when you're counted as 3/5 of a man, socially, you're not able to live life like with the freedoms of everybody else. However, money-wise, it worked for the people in the South. Because if these people are 3/5 of a man, you can't tax me on that, or you can't basically use them as actual people and make me pay full price. Because look, they're 3/5 of a man. My wife and my 12 kids, or my wife and my 50 slaves. You get it? You can't tax me on that. You can't ask me about that. They 3/5 of a man. Hold on. It goes on to say, the federal population schedule 1790 to 1840. So between 1719 and 1840, only the heads of free household appear on these records. All others, including slaves, are noted statistically under the head of household or reported owners. Free African Americans in 1790 and 1840 censuses. It says enumerated with the remainder of free population, black or mulatto indicates the race of the head of household. Other members of the household were listed in age brackets by sex. Census for 1790 and 1810 lists free non-whites in a category titled All Other Free Persons. There is no distinction made between the free blacks and Native Americans not on reservations. It says the census for 1820 to 1840 listed people of color separately. Now, there's a lot going on in this small paragraph. Listen, remember I told you the enumerator is saying who's black, who's mulatto, who's white. When they say all non-whites, remember what was going on at this time. When they did the one drop rule, it was not to show who was black. It was to show who was pure white, lily white. You get it? Remember, the white people during this time are also getting ready to delineate. Why? Because the government is going to pour in poor clears from all over Europe. So they need to make a distinction on who's who, not only between them and the other whites, but even other blacks. So that's why the enumerator would knock on your door, and if you don't look blonde hair, blue eye, and you were a free person, she would automatically put you in that category, as free persons of color, okay? Now, it also says there's no distinction between the blacks and Native Americans not on reservations. Now, let's be clear. There's no distinctions between the blacks and the Native Americans not on reservations. Around this time, black people who were actually the American Indian were told if you wanted to keep your Indian status, you had to conform and go into some of these or one of these 5 civilized tribes. There were a lot of black Indians or Negroes, as you would call them today, who was like, I'm not going. These were the wild Indians that were not placed on the census during the time. Now, you also have some Native Americans who are not on reservations, but be careful with the wording because words are very powerful. They will tell you the black and the Native American and make it seem to be on paper as if they're 2 different people. But the fact of the matter, they'd all be the same person. For instance, see how they say there is no discretion or distinction made between free blacks and Native Americans not on reservations. The gag between that whole situation or that statement would be the blacks are the quote unquote Native Americans, or the Native Americans are the quote unquote Native or are the quote unquote blacks, which would be why there's no distinction made between the two. But if you plan on words and you know the actual word Native American means $5 foot long, then it can throw a monkey wrench in your confusion. Does that make sense? Or at least your understanding of it. It's complicated, but it's really not when you understand it. I hope that I'm explaining this correctly. All right. It says the federal slaves in 1790 to 1840 census, no notations of slave by name, age, sex, or orientation appears. The census lists slaves statistically under the owner's name. Okay. Now you got to keep in mind, they coming to get these census for a lot of reasons. They need to know who all over here, who all there, how many Negroes are here. Because remember, the Louisiana Purchase had happened earlier or in the mid 1800s. I can't remember. Don't give me the line. They got to find out who all is here. They got to take over this land, but this land is populated with people. So was the wild Indians the ones they were scalping? Okay, now that's a whole other story when it comes down to scalping. But from what I understand about scalping, when that was done in the earlier times, it depended on the tribe and what was going on in that situation. But yes, there were people who were doing scalping. Yes, absolutely. Slavery was a thing. Yeah, absolutely. But again, it just depends what region, who are the American Indians, where are they? You know what I'm saying? Because I've heard that the ancient Mayan empire was ruthless as, and they were black people. They say, I didn't say it, they say the ancient Mayans, the way that they did slavery and the scalping and the stuff that they was doing, they say was next level. And if you understand history, and you understand that that's America, that the Mayans is a lot of our history. We got a lot of Mayan stuff and a lot of our stuff we got today. So it's yeah, again, when you understand there's a good and an evil, and you understand that both have to exist. Okay, hold on. We got somebody to teach us something. Nubea, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. It says scalping was spiritual power, achieving warrior status, appeasing spirits, and taking trophies to show dominance. Now, that makes all the sense in the world. Because if you're going to war with a person or a people, yeah, it's almost like taking off their head and bringing it back for a souvenir. That makes all the sense, especially spiritually, because you got to understand with blood and scalping. Yeah, I get it. That makes all the sense. Thank you so much for helping me out with that. Y'all get the likes up on the video, please, and thank you. Get the likes up. Happy Educational Friday, y'all. I hope y'all are doing well. I hope y'all are having a good Friday so far, okay? Okay. Now let's get into the slave owners, right? I want to talk about slave owners during this time because we understand that all black slave owners weren't bad. Everybody wasn't, getting beat down like Kunta Kinte was. It just wasn't that. I know the movies got y'all thinking that's what it was, and it had to be only that. But obviously, it wasn't that, okay? Now, I seen this article. Let me X out of this. I saw this article. Oh, did I X out? Oh, there it goes. I'm sorry. It's called 10 Black Slave Owners That Would Tear Apart Historical Perception, right? Now, in this article, they talk about black people who owned slaves during this time, and I found some interesting stuff in here. It says, in the year 1830, at the height of the transatlantic slave trade, now take these numbers with a grain of salt, there were an estimated 2 million people enslaved in the United States. In the vast majority of cases, they were Africans or enslaved descendants of Africans. That means Black Americans, forced to work on plantations owned by wealthy white individuals. Do you see how they paint the picture, right? It says, but this wasn't always the case. The history books also show that some slaves were owned by people of color. More specifically, according to the historian Carter G. Woodson in 1830, 3,775 freed former slaves owned 12,100 slaves between them, a tiny fraction of American enslaved millions. Now, you know what just dawned on me? This would be more reason why a lot of Black Americans could afford to buy themselves out of slavery and do well as far as become business owners and all that stuff. Because if I'm being bought by somebody who really have my best interest, he's going to probably make sure I get paid better. I'm probably going to learn how to do more stuff because the intention here is to put me on my feet. The intention is not to get free labor. So when you got your own people buying their own people and setting them up for success, this would make sense why so many Black Americans during this time were able to be uber successful once slavery was emancipated, okay? Now, let's move forward. It goes on to say, in many cases, and perhaps in the majority of cases, people of color with slaves only owned one or two individuals. And even this was for personal rather than business reasons. So like if you had a nanny or somebody who cut your grass or somebody who paint or a mason or a bricklayer, you know what I mean? Upon earning their own freedom, they would purchase enslaved relatives in order to be close to their loved ones. But in some cases, free slaves were every bit as business-minded, entrepreneurial, and even ruthless as white plantation owners. Indeed, a handful of people of color not only managed to buy their own freedom, but they went on to amass small fortunes. And this is the hijack. They're going to mention the African American, they're going to mention the Negro, they're going to mention the Native American, and they're going to mention a person of color. And the hijack is all four of them is the same person. Be careful. It's the way they put it in these sentences and the way they want you to interpret the information. If you have to know how to decode it, but to know how to decode it, you got to know what really happened. They will give you 4 or 5 different statuses and it be all the same people. Be careful when you doing research. They do this shit all the time in almost all of their literature. And then they'll say, oh, well, it's no distinction. Probably because they're the same person. Be careful. Words are very, very powerful. I learned that as a little bitty girl. Words are very, very powerful. It says, sometimes this money was made through their sugar. Let me go back. It says, but in some cases, free slaves were every bit as business-minded, entrepreneurial, and even ruthless as white plantation owners. Indeed, a handful of people of color not only managed to buy their own freedom, but they went on to amass small fortunes. Sometimes this money was made through the sugar or cotton trades, often on the backs of slaves of their own. And while some treated their slaves kindly, others were far more ruthless. Let's get into the ones that were ruthless. Here we have Anthony Johnson and his son were notable slave owners in Virginia. And this is what I saw. I saw there were a lot of, they had a lot of rich ass Negroes that owned slaves. Okay. A lot. It says when the first British colonizer settled in Virginia, they faced a problem. How could they get people to work the land? How could they get people to work the land then and in the decades to come? They came up with the concept of indentured servitude. Under this system, anyone wishing to travel to America but lacking the money could have their passage paid for by them by a benefactor. In return, they would give their labor for a fixed number of years. Once they have fulfilled their obligation, they would be free from their service, and so the theory went. They would have gained some valuable skills and be ready to start making a life for themselves in the new world. In many cases, people didn't live long enough to fulfill their contracts and earn their freedom, but some did, including a certain Anthony Johnson. So it looks like, and I don't know if this is in Virginia, so it looks like a lot of our people, because y'all are going to see too when you do the census, you're going to see that your people came off of a boat. Don't stop there. Find out where the boat came from. Do not assume because you found out your ancestor came off a boat into any state that boat came from Africa. That's another chain that you need to break off of your brain. Because remember, that theory comes from the out of Africa theory and also the transatlantic slave theory. We've already debunked the fact that it couldn't have been so many Africans because the transatlantic slave trade database said only 300,000 came to North America as a whole throughout the entire slave trade. So we know that it's impossible to be all these Africans when only 300,000 came between a whole damn near 100 years. There was allegedly trading people back and forth. Okay? So these people, it sounds like some of them, and it makes sense. It's almost like, for instance, let's say 2025. Let's say right now you live, I'm going to use me for an example. I used to live in New Orleans. I was waiting tables, bartending, trying to make ends meet, girl. Every night trying to get my money together. It's no different if somebody from Georgia, from Atlanta, would have called me and said, look, Vu, you could come out here. You could start over fresh. I'll pay you a little couple of dollars. It ain't going to be a lot. But look, I'm going to make sure you eat. I'm going to make sure you got a place to stay. I'm going to charge you a little bit of something, and then you can save your money. Once you get on your feet, then boom, you can get your own place. It was kind of like that. Not exactly like that, but it was kind of like that. A lot of Black people were gathering people to help them to gain their freedom financially, economically. Because remember, slave is a status, and it is also an occupation. This is about money. Monions is what this is about. So, like I said, do your due diligence. If you see an ancestor came off a boat, find out where the boat came from. Most of y'all gonna realize it came from another state. Some of y'all gonna see it came from a Caribbean island. But very, very, very few of you are gonna see that it came from Africa. I'm not saying all of y'all. Very few of you are gonna see that your ancestor came from Africa. As a matter of fact, you're probably going to see the large majority of y'all ancestors who did come from off of a boat came from another state, right up and down that Mississippi River. You get it? That's what those ports and those docks were for. Yeah. I want to read a little bit more, and then I want to show y'all a video. We don't need to know about Anthony Johnson. William Ellison learned the trade, made money, and then purchased slaves, okay? It says William Ellison, the antebellum era of American history saw a number of people of color achieve marked success in business. Indeed, from the end of the 18th century right through the start of the Civil War in 1861, several former slaves became entrepreneurs, none more so than William Ellison Jr. Indeed, by the beginning of the Civil War, he had grown to become one of the most successful businessmen of all South Carolina. Despite being a mulatto, that's mixed, it says, as well as owning a considerable amount of land, he also held dozens of slaves by the time of his death. So how did a slave get to become such a prominent figure? Now, before we move on, a lot of mulattoes, this was the trick that was played on a lot of Black Americans, because we were under the one drop rule, assuming that any form of melanin made you one of us. We didn't see that a lot of these mulattoes were basically like spies. They were getting help financially, economically, and even told what to do by their white counterparts, their white family. They were put in a lot of these places to cosplay. Not all, but they created the mulatto for a reason. The mulatto was the first spy that could walk freely amongst the community, and we not know who it is. If it was a snake, it would have bit you. So they would mix breed with these people, have these children, and put them over your churches, your hospitals, your political movements, and you thinking, oh, what's the one drop rule? They happen have. We got to be on the same team. I'm not saying that about this man, but what I'm telling you is that was very, very prevalent with a lot of mulattoes back then. So when you see, oh, this mulatto had this mulatto had that, they got it from their white daddies. Let's see where they say Ellison got his from. William Ellison Jr. was born April Allison. Oh, his name is April. I like that. William Ellis Jr. was born April Allison in 1790. He was born into slavery on a plantation close to Winnsboro, South Carolina, though there was some confusion over his parentage. Either Robert Ellison, the plantation owner, or his son William Ellison who was listed as April's owner, could have fathered the child. This status gave William some relative privilege on the plantation. Wait, what is it? Either Robert Ellison, the plantation owner, or his... Ooh, so the daddy and his son was messing with that lady? Probably raping her. And let me say this too. This is going to be a horrible thing to say. But some women, not all, some women willingly went into relationships with slave owners. I'm not saying that that's the case here. We got to be honest. We got to rip the Band-Aid off, and we got to talk about it. Matter of fact, what movie that was? Django. Put a 3 in the chat if you remember the movie Django. Remember? No. Yeah. Django. And it's another movie too. But remember in the movie Django when he went to go see Monsieur Candy? Remember when he got the Monsieur Candy, that black lady that sat on the couch who looked like she was dressed up. She looked better than all the other women. And he was like, y'all get out. And she was like, and he was like, not you, darling. And she was like, I know you ain't mean. Put a 3 in the chat. Okay. There was some women who willingly messed with white men. Why? Because, bitch, I'm trying to get on. I don't want to be a slave, bitch. I want to have me some mulatto babies and me and my children live good, bitch. I want to eat crawfish and watch the Mendigo fight. Yay! That was a thing. That was a real thing. Don't let nobody tell you it's wrong to admit it. It was a thing. Right, it was status. No different from today. Like some black women marry up. Yes, back then, they was marrying up. It's in the movies. It's the truth is in front of you. So also, that's another thing. Do your family research. A lot of times, y'all gonna see a white person with your black granny. Oh, Lord. They raped her. Oh, Lord, I can just imagine holding her down, strapping up out of her. Girl, your granny went willingly, girl. Your granny was messing with that man trying to get on. Not all. So don't get offended. For people who do have that type of history in your family, and for those of y'all who do, I'm not trying to make fun of that or none of that. I'm just saying both things happened at the same time. We're not going to act like one of the things happened and the other one didn't. Okay? So don't fret when you see you might have a great-great-great-granddaddy and he's a clear. He might have liked diving in the chocolate, okay? And your granny probably was trying to get on. I ain't mad at her because I ain't going to hold you. I don't like white boys, but if that was a way to freedom back then, was going to go get me one. Girl, you want me to go be a slave with your niggas in the juke joint? Girl. I'll be like that lady on Django. I know you ain't mean. Smoking my long cigarette, bitch. Sipping my cognac. Yay. You know what other movie? 12 Years a Slave. Put a 3 in the chat. Y'all remember when the girl, the African girl, what's her name? Lupita Nyong'o, whatever her name. Her character, remember she ran away and she was trying to go find some soap. And remember the slave master wanted to whoop her little bald head ass because she ran away. And then she went by the slave and it was a white man and it was a black lady. The black lady was married to the white man. They had money, bitch. They was sitting on the porch drinking lemonade. It was the black lady who gave her the soap. Remember she went back and got her ass whooped behind that soap. I'm telling you, yeah, Miss Hart, all for a bar of soap. All this for a bar of soap. That's the real depiction of some of the things that was really happening. No, for real. For real. She ran across a black free woman who was married to a clear. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. The shit be real. I ain't over here trying to downplay nobody's historical references or their historical stuff, but I'm just telling you both things existed. Okay. Let's see how he got his money. It says, so they don't know who his dad is. It could be the slave owner or his son. Then he goes on to say, this status gave William some relative privilege on the plantation. Didn't I tell you they get their status and their stuff from their white parents? So because they didn't know who his daddy was, they gave him privilege. Significantly, the Ellison men decided that the young April should learn a skill. And so, at the age of 10, he became an apprentice cotton gin maker. 6 years later, he finished his apprenticeship and was armed with a skill that was much in demand across the Deep South. He immediately got to work. Now, this is basically his possible daddies looking out for him. Even if he's a mulatto, even if he mixed, he still is one of us. That's what you call creating generational wealth. That is what you call passing down, making sure your child can survive once you close your eyes. Even if it's a half-breed and you don't really like that motherfucker. I need to make sure he can take care of himself. And if he's a cutthroat clear, then he's really saying, go get this trade because I'm going to need you to go finagle these niggas later on. It goes on to say, since he was still technically a slave, albeit one who was hired out, April's master kept most of what the young men earned in a nearby workshop. April was, however, allowed to keep a small portion of his earnings, including wages for work done on Sunday, and he was ultimately able to buy his freedom from the Ellisons. Girl, he had the privilege. That's all. He had a clear daddy, and his clear daddy looked out for him. That's it. That's all. That's where it starts. That's where it stops. I don't give a damn what these folks on here saying. His clear daddy made sure he got an education, made sure he got a trade, and made sure he was set up for the rest of his life. And a lot of the black women who married white married solely for that reason. I'd rather have a bunch of mulatto babies who are going to be set up and well taken care of for the rest of their life. It's kind of like survival. I get it. There were a lot of black women, not all, but there are a lot of black women who married white men, married for status, married to make sure I'd rather have my little half-breed babies taken care of, okay? Now, I want to get into, hold on. It's one more article before I get into this video I want to show y'all. It's two. It's really quickly, though. I ain't going to be long. Let's look at the black slave owners in Kentucky. Now, let's be clear. All around the South, there were successful black slave owners, period, okay? However, there were some that were more successful than others. Some that a lot of people were like, yo, like these people were like these people were named like celebrities, like almost. Like they were lit amongst the crowds, okay? Let me go down to the part I want to show y'all. Y'all like the video, please. If you haven't already, please like the video. Let's just read it. I think this is the one. It says African-American owners of enslaved persons in Kentucky. In 1924, the research department of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History completed a study of the free Negro slave owners found in the 1830 U.S. federal census. The study found 3,777. I find that number odd. Shout out to 777. But the study found 377,000 Negro slave owners in the United States. Negro slave owners were listed in 29 counties. So that means they had almost 4,000 slave owners in Kentucky, in 29 counties across Kentucky. It says the organization is located in Washington, D.C. Ownership of any enslaved persons may have meant the purchase of a spouse, an individual's children, or relatives who were not emancipated. Ownership was also investment. Purchased children and adults may or may not have been given the opportunity to work off their purchase price in exchange for their freedom. So it's kind of like what we were saying before. If you couldn't afford to work it off with that white boy, I'll buy your freedom and then I'll help you to free yourself. A history of world societies documents a total of 6,000 Negro slave owners in the United States for the year 1840. It says, please note that in the 1850 and 1860 slave schedules do not identify slave owners by race. That's on purpose because we were the ones. The individual names of slave owners must be searched in the U.S. federal census to identify individuals' race. What would you do if you found out that the reason why they keep that part under wraps is because it was most of us? and I ain't gonna say most, but way more of us that were owning slaves than we were led on to be. Because remember, they want us to believe that we were all just some poor, downtrodden Africans who came off a boat, they beat us, hung us, raped us, worked us to death, and that was it. Everybody black was a slave, and everybody white was free and was rich. That's what they want us to believe. But when you start doing the research, you're going to start seeing there was a crap ton of slave owners all around America, especially in the South. And it wasn't always because they were harsh, horrible people. A lot of times they were helping our other people buy their freedom. If you understand it for what it really is and not for what the movie told you, you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. One more. Hold on. One more right quick. A History of Slave Resistance in the United States. It says, The Slave Rebellion. The Black Slave Owners by Joseph E. Holloway. The majority of black slave owners were members of the mulatto class. Now remember, mulatto, let's be clear, it's two ways we finding out who mulatto. Number one, mixed race. Number two, if you was light-skinned and the system enumerator said you was mulatto, your ass was mulatto. But for this purposes, remember, most of the slave owners, a lot of them, are mulatto. But I told y'all that they created the mulatto. They deliberately made it white people with black people to create this class of mulatto people, okay? For purposes of control, in my opinion. It says, many of the mulatto slave owners separated themselves from the masses of black people and attempted to establish a caste system based on color, wealth, and free status. According to Martin Delaney, the colored community of Charleston City clung to the assumptions of the superiority of white blood and brown skin complexion. These mulattoes of the old free black elite did not attend church with the dark-skinned blacks of Charleston City. They not only formed congregations which excluded freedmen of dark complexion, but they only married among their mulattoes to keep the color in the family. Now, you know, this is a representation of this is the Talented Tenth, or what is it? The Talented Tenth, or y'all know how I am with names. The Boule. All them pale, all of them waffle colored Negroes, all of them biracial. Do you understand me? W.E.B. Du Bois, all of them biracial. This is my belief. Rosa Parks too, yeah. Listen, this is my belief. Because the Talented Tenth tells you we created this to basically say we're going to be the 10% that rules the 90%. We're going to be the ones who are highly educated. We the ones, yeah, that's them D9. Yay! All of that. We still see them amongst ourselves today. Okay? So these people, this new class of mulattoes, are going to cosplay amongst the people as Negro. These are going to be the people to create the NAACP. This is another system or organization that was told to us to be something to help us. But we realized when you peel back the layers, the NAACP did more harm for us than help. Okay, so this mulatto class, I told you, I believe, was created on purpose to cosplay amongst the Negroes as Negroes, but really do the due diligence and the bad negative things of the whites. It said these mulattoes of old free black elite did not attend church. We already talked about that. They only married amongst themselves. Large numbers of free blacks owned black slaves in numbers disproportionate to their representation in society. According to the federal census of 1830, free blacks owned more than 10,000 slaves in Louisiana, Maryland, South Carolina, and Virginia. The majority of black slave owners lived in Louisiana and planted sugar cane. Now, we all know Louisiana is ground zero for the mulatto. That's where you get your Creole, or at least your New Age Creole, because Creoles wasn't necessarily about skin color. At one point, Creole was an identity. Now you see these new, all these octoroons and quadroons running around here, and they call themselves Creoles, but they're really a bunch of mixed breeds. A bunch of Negroes mixed with a bunch of, let me tell you how it started. It'd be a white person, typically in Louisiana, of French or Spanish descent. He go sleep with a black woman. They create a mulatto baby. That mulatto baby only sleep with other mulattoes. And they create a whole bunch of glazed donuts looking churn. And then them churn turn into dating other churn that look like them. And the next thing you know, you got a whole population of the Creoles, who really just a bunch of octoroons, quadroons, for lack of better terms, just a bunch of mixed people. That's all. Okay? But they created these people to rule. Listen, it says the majority of black slave owners lived in Louisiana and planted sugarcane, which is a large number of the Creoles. Slave holding among the mulatto class in South Carolina was widespread, according to the first census in 1790, which revealed that 36 out of 102, or 35.2% of the free black heads of families held slaves in Charleston City. So that means in 1790, 35.2% of black people owned slaves. It says by 1800, 1 out of every 3 black recorded owning slave property. That means they had people who were listed as slaves, even if that slave was their wife and their children or their niece and nephew, cousin, uncle, sister, brother, mama, daddy. It don't matter. That's what the status was, and that's what it was. It went on to say between 1820 and 1840, the percentage of slave holdings, heads of household or head of family, ranged from 72.1% to 77.7%. However, by 1850, the percentage fell to 42.3%. So let's be clear. Between 1820 and 1840, 72.1% to 77.77% or 77.7% were slave owners. But within a 10 to 20 year time period, it dropped by 42.3%. Who understands why that happened? How can we go from Kentucky and in the South that 77% of black people own slaves to just in 10 years, now only 40% of black people own slaves? I want to see who's been paying attention. How can that happen? How can we drop 30% slave owners between 10 years? I want to see who's going to put it in there. That's, you close, but no, you close. How can we go from having 77% slave owners in 1840? Because remember, we didn't get emancipated to 1865. We didn't get that's another one too. Reclassified is another way. Yes, reclassified is another way, but there's another way too. It's another one that's more literal. I'll give it to y'all just in case nobody catch it. The more literal reason why you go from 77% slave owners in 1840 to 40% slave owners in 1850 is because of the who? The government. They're introducing the people to come in and take your land. They are literally running people from the South. Remember, they had the Louisiana Purchase. We need this land. But oh my God, there are people there. Get them out of here. Pack them up. We need that land. We need that money. And if they got slaves, we need them too. Highway robbery, for lack of better term. Does that make sense? So around this time, we are being stolen from. This is why genealogy is important for reparations. When I tell you you can go back and get your land through genealogy, this is what I'm talking about. A lot of us are being moved and forced and killed even to take our land. So that's a big reason. So yeah, reclassification, obviously. Then you also have to worry about paper genocide. There's that. But then you gotta taxes, yes, eminent domain, all of that takes place. But it really, the biggest threat to us during this time is the government. Because remember, we're the ones that's doing better. The whites are poor, especially the ones coming over around this time. They don't know the language. They don't have no skill. They're poor. Poor clears is what they are. Okay? I want to read a little bit more. It goes on to say, did I read? Okay. According to the U.S. Census report in 1860, only a small minority of whites owned slaves. Out of a population of 27 million whites, only 8 million lived in the South. Let me start over again. According to the U.S. Census report in 1860, we didn't get emancipated till 1865. Let that sink in. We didn't get emancipated till 1865. What was happening in 1860? It says, according to the U.S. Census report, in 1860, only a small minority of whites owned slaves. Out of a population of 27 million whites, only 8 million lived in the South. So that would mean that's why 77% of the slave owners were either mulatto or black. Because I told y'all in other lives, there was not a large population of white people in the South. They were just pouring them in through Ellis Island, promising them land and incentivizing them land, telling them if you go to the South, you're going to get your land and stuff there. It wasn't even a lot of white folks down South to be slave owners. So if only 8 million were here, and out of the 8 million, how many they say own slaves? They said only, according to the census, only a small minority of slaves were owners. I'm sorry. According to the U.S. Census report in 1860, only a small minority of whites owned slaves, and out of the population of 27 million whites in America, only 8 million lived in the South. And out of this population, fewer than 385,000 owned slaves. That would have to mean that's because the black people were the majority. That would have to mean that's why your ancestors fought on the side of the South during the Civil War, because they were fighting for their own best interest. You get it? My own land, my own people, my own workers, my own shit. But the school gonna teach you that all the blacks in the South were slaves and forced to fight in the wars because they were slaves. That's a lie. It goes on to say, in short, the total white population owned about 1.4, while the southern white population owned about 4.8 enslaved Africans. On the other hand, the black population in 1860 was 4.5 million, with about 500,000 living in the South. These numbers are not right. But of the blacks residing in the South, 261,988 were not slaves. Of this number, 10,689 lived in New Orleans. In New Orleans, over 3,000 free blacks owned slaves, about 28% of the free black population in the city. So this is kind of giving you a window into what was really going on. Through school, they told us that all the whites were slave owners and all the blacks were slaves. All the movies depict that. All of the books show that. But when you go looking in the history, you'll see that it wasn't enough white folks in the South to be the primary slave owners. As a matter of fact, they were just pouring them in. And the ones who were here weren't even enough to pinch the majority of the population, because the population in the South, has always, and still to this day, majority been black. Even now, the majority of people in the South are black. I don't give a damn what a census record say. I don't give a damn what a YouTuber say. The majority in America has always been black. Now I want to read y'all this. I want to show y'all this video that I found, right? So I found this video, and it was this guy. It was a good video too, talking about black slaves in the South, right? And black people who own slaves, right? Let me go to the video, and I'm gonna tell you who did the video. Dark Estate. Dark Estate is the name of the guys whose video this is. I want to show y'all a little bit of this video. He talks about black slave owners in this video, right? Let me go back. He talks about, I don't think I need to go back this far. He talks about black slave owners in this video, but he talks about it from the perspective of the black people who own slaves are horrible people. Oh my God. Now, I'm not going to lie. The video, he does talk about the black people who own slaves who were not horrible people. But when you pay attention to the rhetoric, when he speaks, this narrator, he speaks from a perspective, of the people who own slaves had to be horrible. Now, remember, I'm not putting this at the fault of the person who does the documentary, because I understand that the people wanted us to think that's what it was. And we believe that. We internalize it. And when we do our research, we find things to affirm that bias that we've already been taught. But the fact of the matter is that wasn't the case. So keep that in mind when you're listening to these docs, y'all. Check this out. Like the video if you haven't already, please, y'all.
White cruelty, with clean lines between the oppressed and the oppressors. But the Metoyers do not fit that story. They were black. They were once enslaved or descended from enslaved people. And they became slaveholders themselves, not out of some noble desire to protect family members, but as a business decision, a path to wealth in an economy that ran on human bondage. The cotton they grew, the sugar some of them refined, the fortunes they accumulated, all of it was built on the same brutal system that had once held their ancestors in chains. By 1830, the Metoyer family collectively owned more enslaved people than any other black family in America. Their plantation homes rivaled those of the wealthiest white planters. They sent their children to be educated in France. They commissioned portraits, accumulated libraries, and built a church that still serves the community today. The Church of St. Augustine, constructed in 1829 with Metoyer money, stands as one of the oldest black Catholic churches in the United States. Its weathered brick walls have witnessed nearly 2 centuries of worship, baptism, marriage, and mourning.
Now, this is the part I was unsure about, because he's talking about St. Augustine, or some people in New Orleans call it St. Augustine. If he's talking about, because he's talking about slave owners in Louisiana, and I'm pretty positive he's talking about the church and the school in New Orleans. My daddy went to that school. It's an all-black Catholic school, but it is also a church. It is where the elites, the who's who of the Negroes went. So if I can kind of give y'all more of a situation about my mom and my daddy's side of the family. My daddy came from Louisiana and Florida, and his side of the family were more of the who's who. It's a lot of mulattoes over there, Creoles over there. You know, they did status bars, and they had like debutante, stuff like that. My daddy went to St. Aug and graduated from St. Aug. St. Aug in New Orleans is the oldest church and school, I want to say, in the state. So I want to say that that's who he's referring to when he's calling it St. Augustine or St. Augustine or however he pronounced it. But it is still right now to this day an all-black boys school, and the church is still up there in New Orleans. Actually, it's right there off of AP2 Road from around my grandma's house.
Yet those same walls were built by enslaved hands, directed by black masters who saw no contradiction in their faith and their fortune. The moral arithmetic of slavery in Louisiana operated by rules that seem incomprehensible today. State law actually made it difficult for slaveholders to free enslaved people. Manumission, as the legal process was called, required court approval, and courts increasingly denied such requests as the 18th.
Why? Because black people was buying people as slaves and helping them getting their freedom. That's why they made it hard for you to purchase your freedom. Even if you was a slave and you was a slaver helping the slave. They made it hard through the court system because they realized, wait a minute, these niggas is helping to buy each other so they can help each other to get free.
1800s progressed. This meant that some black slaveholders genuinely could not free the people they had purchased, even when they wanted to. Family members bought out of bondage sometimes remained legally enslaved because no judge would grant their freedom. But this was not the whole story. The Metoyers and families like them also purchased enslaved people who were strangers, workers bought purely for their labor value. These were not rescue missions. They were business transactions. The historian Michael P. Johnson spent decades trying to understand this world. His research revealed that by 1830, there were more than 3,000 free black slaveholders in the United States, owning collectively nearly 13,000 enslaved people. Most held fewer than 5, and many of these were indeed family members trapped by legal obstacles to freedom. But a significant...
You know what's crazy? I don't mean to stop it, but I got to stop it for commentary anyway. I'm back, beautiful black. Thank you so much for the super chat. I mean, the cash app, my love. I appreciate you. Who else on here? Armand, thank you for the cash app. Robin, thank you for the cash app. Michelle, thank you for the cash app. Let me say this. What am I about to say?
Significant minority were large-scale planters whose operations differed from white slaveholders only in the color of the master's skin.
Hold on.
These were indeed family members trapped by legal obstacles to freedom. But a significant minority were large-scale planters whose operations differed from white slaveholders only in the color of the master's skin. They bought and sold human beings at auction. They used overseers and punishment to maintain discipline. They profited from the same brutal calculus that turned people into property.
Oh, that's what I was going to say, because he's kind of going into it now. I told you, I believe they created the class of mulattoes to cosplay in front of Black America, but really do the bidding of their predecessors, right? Or their forefathers. Also, there were some Black or mulatto slave owners that were horrible. But a lot of them were horrible because they think clear. I'll give you an example. We were talking about it earlier with Klay Thompson, and I told y'all Klay Thompson is not no nigga. I said he ain't never been raised around no niggas. And when I was saying that, I was talking about his mentality, the culture, who he is. He doesn't have the essence of the average Black person. A lot of mulattoes and a lot of Black people get tricked because we see the skin and automatically assume that the skin makes them culturally like us. And the fact of the matter is that's not the truth. There was a large number of mulattoes specifically sent to the South to get us stripped politically, economically, religiously, and all that stuff. And they were kind of like undercover, overcover agents. It's kind of like they were sent in, we're going to act like we all want Adam Clayton Powell, all these other people who were so racially ambiguous, you looking like, how did y'all not know they were white? These are the people who were sent and made and created by the powers that be to do exactly what they did. As a matter of fact, they switched from the mulatto, and in 2025, now they use the Caribbean and the African. They get a person with Black-looking skin and think that we're supposed to stop at the skin, and we have in the past. We never looked past that. They get a person with Black-looking skin who we think is going to have our best interests at heart, but in truth, they actually have the agenda of the powers that be in their best minds, right? So it's the same thing was happening then. There were a lot of mulattoes that were harsh to Black people. There were some Black people who were harsh to Black people. But when you think about those mulattoes, you got to understand they are still half white at the end of the day.
And labor into wealth. William Ellison of South Carolina stands as perhaps the most striking example. Born into slavery around 1790 in the Fairfield district of South Carolina, he was originally named April. His father was almost certainly his white master, William Ellison Sr., who owned a cotton plantation. Young April showed unusual mechanical aptitude from childhood. He could take apart and reassemble anything. He understood gears, levers, and the complex machinery that was transforming Southern agriculture. His master recognized this talent and apprenticed him to a cotton gin maker, a decision that would change both their fortunes. Cotton gins were essential technology in the early 1800s. Eli Whitney's invention had made short staple cotton profitable, but the machines required constant maintenance and skilled repair. April learned every aspect of the trade. He could build a gin from scratch, repair broken parts, and improve designs to process cotton faster. By his late 20s, he had become so valuable that his master faced a choice. He could keep April enslaved and benefit from his skills, or he could allow this talented man to purchase his own freedom. In 1816, April did exactly that. He paid $800, a fortune at the time, earned from making and repairing cotton gins in whatever hours remained after his enslaved labor. He took his former master's name, becoming William Ellison, and began building his own cotton gin manufacturing business.
Mind you, the former owner is his daddy. It's either the daddy or the daddy's son. So apparently a white man owned the plantation and he had a son. Both of them were smashing on William's mama. So no wonder, let's call a thing a thing. He was able to buy his freedom. He was able to do all of the things he was did because he had that white daddy.
Within a decade, William Ellison had become one of the most successful businessmen in South Carolina, black or white. Planters from across the state brought their cotton gins to his workshop in Stateburg. His reputation for quality work spread throughout the region. He bought land, first a few acres, then dozens, then hundreds. By 1840, he owned more than 300 acres of prime cotton land, and he owned enslaved people to work it. By 1860, just before the Civil War, William Ellison held 63 enslaved people, making him one of the largest black slaveholders in the entire South. What made William Ellison particularly troubling to later generations was his apparent embrace of the slave.
I thought that was Frederick Douglass. See, this is what I be talking about. I thought that was Frederick Douglass. I know they ain't trying to pass this off as William Ellison this day. Y'all gotta be careful, babe.
System. He did not simply inherit enslaved workers or purchase family members. He bought, sold, and traded human beings as business assets. Court records show him pursuing runaway enslaved people with the same determination as any white planter. He separated families when it suited his economic interests. He accumulated wealth not despite slavery, but because of it, using the same methods and moral justifications employed by his white neighbors. When the Civil War began, Ellison's sons volunteered to serve the Confederacy, fighting to preserve the institution that had once enslaved their father. The Ellison story forces—
But that's not right. It makes sense for Ellison's sons to fight on the side of the Confederacy. Yes, because even though my daddy used to be a slave, nigga, we rich. The fuck? I'm supposed to fight for my daddy's side. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. See, but they gonna tell it to you as if it was kind of a catch-22, like, oh, you fought on the side of the Confederate, even though the South owned your daddy. But by the time I was born, my daddy was up, nigga. We was up. He had 60-something slaves. We was rich. Yes, that's why I'm fighting on the side of the Confederacy. You see what I'm saying? That was a lot of our ancestors, bruh. A lot of our ancestors fought on the side of the Confederacy because when you take the Hollywood emotionalism out of what we believe to be slavery, you understood it was black and white. Bottom line, my nigga, I'm fighting because my daddy got land on the line. That's why I'm fighting on the side of the Confederacy, nigga. We got land on the line. That's it. Easy peasy. It makes the most logical sense in all of the world. All of that, even though they own my daddy as a slave, I just feel like I'm obligated to fight. No, my daddy getting money. I got to protect my daddy assets. That's why I'm fighting on the side of the slavery.
Thus, to confront uncomfortable questions about human nature and moral compromise. How could a man who had experienced bondage, who knew its brutality firsthand, become a brutal master himself? Was it simply greed? Was it survival? The desperate need to accumulate enough wealth and power that no one could ever enslave him again? Or was it something darker, a kind of moral blindness that allowed him to see his own suffering as unique while dismissing the suffering of others?
One thing I noticed, they never said this man William beat none of them slaves. They never said he, unless I missed it, somebody drop down in the comments. They say he was a horrible, brutal master, but they never went into detail of what he did that made him so horrible. The only thing they saying was he was mulatto and he had over 60-some slaves at his height. 60-something at its height. Remember, the average person didn't have a plantation and they had hundreds of niggas just working on it. That's the movies. The average person who owned a slave owned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can count them bitches on 1 or 2 hands. The movies got you thinking it was one white boy and it was a whole bunch of slaves and he was cracking the whip. You feel what I'm saying? That's not the truth. So for William to have at his height 60-something slaves, he actually was rich. He was up, all the way up. Status-wise, William was that nigga. And they saying he was a horrible slave master, but I have yet to see them say he beat somebody, killed somebody, or none of that. Only thing they saying is he was black and he had money and he had buku slaves. But if they want to keep you mentally enslaved to believe that slavery was just this horrible event, and I'm not saying it was good, but if they want you to believe slavery in the way they want you to believe it, then they have to present it to you like that.
These questions have no easy answers. They reveal the ways that systems of oppression corrupt everyone they touch, victim and perpetrator alike. Andrew Durnford of Louisiana presents yet another variation on this troubling theme. Born around 1780 to a white Scottish immigrant father and a free woman of color mother, Durnford grew up with advantages that most black people in Louisiana could never imagine. His father acknowledged him, educated him, and left him substantial property.
You get it?
By his 30s, Durnford had established himself as a sugar planter on St. Rosalie Plantation in Plaquemines Parish. Sugar cultivation was even more labor-intensive than cotton, requiring gangs of workers to cut cane, process it quickly before spoilage, and maintain the complex machinery of the sugar mill. At his peak, Andrew Durnford owned more than 70 enslaved people. What makes Durnford's story particularly complex is the extensive correspondence he left behind. His letters reveal a man who struggled with the contradictions of his position. He expressed genuine affection for individual enslaved people, while simultaneously treating them as property. He worried about their health and welfare one moment, then calculated their market value the next. In one letter, he described his attachment to certain enslaved workers. In another, he discussed selling a woman away from her children because she had become troublesome. The cognitive dissonance is breathtaking, and yet Durnford was not unique. He was simply more articulate about the mental gymnastics required to be a slaveholder with a conscience. Durnford also left records of a friendship with John McDonough, a wealthy white planter who developed an elaborate scheme to gradually free his enslaved workers by allowing them to purchase their freedom over 15 years.
John McDonough is the name of a school in New Orleans. My people went to John Mac, but it's crazy because I just learned this recently, not today, but I learned this a couple of weeks ago that he was a white man who was working to free his slaves. That's crazy.
McDonough presented this as progressive and enlightened. The enslaved people would learn the value of work and saving. They would earn their liberty through their own efforts. They would be grateful rather than resentful when freedom finally came. In practice, the system extracted additional years of labor from people who had already given their lives to bondage. Durnford admired McDonough's approach and considered implementing something similar. Yet he never did. The economics of sugar planting made such schemes impractical, and Andrew Durnford, whatever his private doubts, was first and always a businessman. The free black planter class reached its peak in the Iowa 1850s, the decade before the Civil War. By then, the combined wealth of black slaveholders in Louisiana alone exceeded several $1 million, an astronomical sum in that era. They owned some of the finest plantation homes in the state. They traveled to Paris and New Orleans, educated their children in the best schools, and cultivated a refinement that matched or exceeded their white neighbors. And they lived in constant fear, because the system that had made their wealth possible was turning against them. As the debate over slavery intensified, white Southerners grew increasingly suspicious of all free black people. They represented a dangerous contradiction, living proof that black people could be successful, educated, and independent. State legislatures passed ever more restrictive laws.
And let me say this, because I want to correct this narrative. The narrative that we have been taught was that we were slaves, and then we came out of slavery, and we got this big boost of luck or energy or godlike powers, and we all went in droves and went to college and became business owners, and all the whites who were up at the time was like, oh my God, we got to stop these Negroes. They're going to get too successful. So then they all band together. That's a lie. What was going on was the reason why the blacks were doing so well was because we were already doing so well. The reason why the blacks that were coming out of slavery were doing so well is because a lot of the ones who were already was doing well was making sure that they were helping them to do well. Because the blacks that were in slavery were not in it the way you think that they were in it. Okay. Also, the reason why the whites was so upset is not because we were getting to be well, because we were already well off. They were poor, dusty, musty, disease-ridden clears coming off a boat. They had nothing. They had no skills, no language, no name, no nothing. Their occupation, if you want it, go take it from them Negroes. So the narrative they give us, is that the whites saw that we were excelling and they got scared and they say, oh my God, we got to stop these niggas. That's a lie. What was really going on was we was already up. We was already up. They were down. And in order for them to come up, what did they have to do? Take it from us. It's like robbery. If I don't have it and you do, then what do I need to do? Rob you so that now I can have it and then you don't. That's exactly what happened. Okay? Do not accept the narrative that you had to go through slavery, come out nothing, and have this miracle for you to be something. You are who you've always been. Okay? These white folks came in looking at you mad because you was already that. A lot of these people who was up during this time was already up. We just told you 77% of the slave owners in 1850 were black. In Kentucky, at least. 77% in 1850 were black. That tells you we was already up. We was already up. That's why it was so easy for us to own land, get businesses, because we was already there. That makes more logical sense than the miracle they want us to believe.
People of color faced curfews, registration requirements, and bans on certain occupations. They could not testify against whites in court. They could not vote or hold office. They existed at the pleasure of their white neighbors, their freedom always conditional, always revocable. The Metoyers felt this pressure acutely. In the 1850s, Louisiana passed laws requiring all free black people who had arrived after 1825 to leave the state. Though this technically exempted the Metoyers, who had lived along the Cane River for generations.
See, in 1825, all free blacks had to leave Louisiana. Why you think that is? Y'all too lit. Y'all own the slaves. Y'all own the land. Yeah, we got to get these niggas up out of here. Hell no. Mind you, they trying to pour in whites through Ellis Island in the north to get them to come down south. We got to stop the influx of blacks coming in, and we got to import more whites to stop this. Now, once we do that, we have to change the tides. How do we start that? Let's get in politically. We'll get in through that way, and then we'll stop them there. We won't let them vote. We won't let them do this, that, and the third. It was a gradual process. between then all the way up. But I'm telling you, everything they tell us is get contradicted when you go and really look at the history. Everything we've been taught is a lie. Literally. That's what Educational Friday is all about.
It created an atmosphere of persecution and fear. Some family members considered emigrating to Mexico or Haiti, places where their skin color would not mark them as perpetual outsiders.
Not true.
Others dug in, determined to hold on to the land and wealth their grandmother Coin had sacrificed so much to build. They had no way of knowing that within a decade, everything would change. The wealth of black planters was built on a foundation that could not survive the coming conflict. They had accumulated property and human beings, and that property was about to be rendered worthless. They had allied themselves, however uneasily, with a slave power that would soon be destroyed. They had created fortunes within a system that could not imagine them as full participants, and when that system collapsed, they would discover just how fragile their position had always been. But before the fall came the final flowering. In the years just before the Civil War, the great houses of the Metoyers stood in splendor along the Cane River. Melrose Plantation.
Why is Frederick Douglass' picture used for so many depictions of black men in that time? Y'all ever notice that? It's almost like if it's a black man that we never heard of, they always go get this picture of Frederick Douglass. Why? Is this even Frederick Douglass at this point? Because why do y'all use the same picture for everybody? And this ain't the first time. I would say it's this YouTuber, and maybe he couldn't find no photos, so he just went and got this one. I would love to just believe that's the case. But I've seen actual, real, authentic, top tier documentaries, and they all use this picture. Why? Right, I'm with you, girl. At this point, it ain't even him. I'm with you. At this point, it ain't even him. Because why does everybody use this one picture? Come on now. It's too suspicious. It just is. Pay attention. When you go look at a lot of history, they're going to talk about a person you never heard of, and the picture going to be right here. It's going to be this picture right here. You're going to be like, wait a minute, that nigga look familiar. Because that's Frederick Douglass, girl. At least allegedly. Bitch, I don't know what's going on at this point.
With its grand columns and French doors, welcomed visitors to soirée where the finest wines accompanied conversations in French and English. The family library contained hundreds of volumes, many imported from Paris. Children practiced piano in drawing rooms decorated with furniture from New Orleans craftsmen. Enslaved servants moved silently through these spaces, serving the same meals, performing the same labor, suffering the same bondage as their counterparts on white-owned plantations nearby. The only difference was the color of the hand that held the whip. William Ellison had built his own mansion by 1850, a fine home that still stands in Statesburg, South Carolina. He had transformed himself from enslaved mechanic to wealthy planter and respected businessman. His cotton gin workshop employed both free and enslaved workers, turning out machines that processed the harvest of neighboring plantations. He belonged to the same Episcopal church as the wealthiest white families in the area, sitting in a pew that proclaimed his status to all who entered. His children and grandchildren would carry his name into the uncertain future, unaware that everything they had built was about to be swept away. Andrew Durnford died in 1859, just 2 years before the war began. He never had to witness the destruction of everything he had created. But his heirs watched as federal gunboats steamed up the Mississippi, as Union armies marched through Louisiana.
Look at them Negroes. And that one there's a Creole or mulatto there, but you could tell he got black in him. You could look at you feel what I'm saying? Because see, this is a lot of things. And when I tell y'all about the Creoles in New Orleans, and y'all who from New Orleans know I ain't lying, a lot of them look just like this. Skin-wise, they look white. But then when you look at them, the nigga jump out on you. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how it works. It's not like a mulatto. It's different. It's not like a biracial. With a biracial, you just kind of know they biracial. But them Creoles hit different because they look white as hell. But something about when you get up on them, the nigga just jump out on you. You know what I'm saying? A lot of them, that's them, they were a lot of the Creoles that were put in place to cosplay and mess over black people too. But a lot of them, to make sure that they maintain the Creole status, they just procreated with each other. That's why you see them to this day. I know a lot of them. Matter of fact, some of them on my daddy's side of the family, okay? They look just like that. They white looking, but when you talk to them, or it's something about their essence or their aura, I don't know if it's the nigga blood. It's different. It's different from a biracial person. If you understand, if you ever met a Creole person, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's different from a biracial person. The essence and the aura of them Creoles is different. The real ones, not the white ones running around here acting like they Creole. The real ones. Yeah, it's their aura. It's their aura. It's different.
As the enslaved people who had built his sugar empire walked away into freedom, the plantation system that had made men like Durnford wealthy collapsed with breathtaking speed, and the black planter class collapsed with it. What happened next reveals just how precarious their position had always been. When the war ended and Reconstruction began, the former black slaveholders found themselves in an impossible situation. They had lost their enslaved labor force, the foundation of their agricultural operations. They had lost much of their property to wartime destruction and confiscation, and they had lost any claim to solidarity with the newly freed black population. The freed people remembered who had owned them. They remembered the whip, the auction block, the families torn apart. They did not distinguish between white masters and black masters when it came to settling accounts. The Metoyer family struggled to maintain their holdings in the chaotic years after the war. Some members had supported the Confederacy, believing that their interests lay with the planter class regardless of race. Others had quietly hoped for Union victory, sensing that the old order could not survive and might be replaced by something better. Either way, they faced a transformed world that had no place for them. The great plantations broke apart. Land that had been worked by hundreds of enslaved people could not be profitably farmed without their labor. Former slaveholders, black and white alike, tried various arrangements: sharecropping, tenant farming, wage labor, none of which generated the wealth of the old system. The Metoyer fortune dwindled year by year. Grand houses fell into disrepair. Libraries were sold.
I just got this download and I'm going to share it because I got it and I don't want to forget it. So the download I got was the majority of the black people in the South, or the majority of slave owners and the people in the South were black. That's the number one reason why the people of North wanted to fight the South, because there was a lot of black people who were very well off, very rich, very wealthy. They had their own economic system. What else I got in that download just now? Oh, the other part I got in that download just now is the reason why the Civil War happened was so they can have the influx of whites to come in after and then cosplay and take over the wealth. What do I mean by that? So by the time before slavery, all the way leading up to emancipation, they take all of the wealth from the black people who had the wealth, the land and all that stuff. They replaced them with the white people, but then they switched the story to us to tell us it's always been the white people. But the fact of the matter is it never was the white people. It really was the black people. Now, I'm not saying no white people fought on the side of the South and in the Confederacy, because obviously there were white people here. But the mass majority of the people in the South who were doing well were black people. And that's why they had to go to war with the North, because they were trying to take the economic freedom from the black people in the South. And then when they got their freedom taken from the South, that's when they poured in the influx of whites after the emancipation of slavery to then act in or step in as the actual slave owners to show us, or to us, okay, mentally. So they'll put them in positions in police, sheriff, schools, political power, put them in these positions to then mentally make you think that they won. Because, you know, they say that they really didn't win. I don't know. That's the download I got. I just got to, you know, I don't know. But I'm saying all that to say it's more likely to have more black people fighting on the side of the South and actually being the ones losing the wealth because it was the majority of us here. Do your own research. It wasn't a lot of white people in the South.
Off volume by volume. The elegant clothes and fine furniture gave way to practical necessities. Within a generation, the wealthiest black family in American history had become just another struggling community in rural Louisiana. And then something even stranger happened. The memory itself began to disappear. White historians had no interest in preserving the story of black slaveholders. It complicated their narrative of benevolent masters and grateful slaves. Black historians, emerging in the late 1800s and early 1900s, likewise avoided the topic. It contradicted their narrative of unified black resistance and suffering. The complex truth.
I'm going to tell you the download I'm getting. The white people didn't want to talk about it because if they talked about it, they'd have to admit that the niggas was up, and then they would have to admit that they lying about their history. And the niggas didn't want to talk about it because a lot of them was the Freemasons that's in on the joke to keep us all enslaved. You know, like the Talented Tent and all of them people. So the niggas kept it quiet. That's that secret. That's why we got Mason lounges all over the place. The niggas kept it quiet so that they can benefit, and the white folks kept it quiet so that they can benefit. Kind of like on the low, they kind of shook hands under the table. Hey, Talented Tent, we'll keep it a secret between us. We'll make them think one thing, but we'll keep it a secret between us. You make sure you straight and your family. We make sure we straight and we family. And we'll let them niggas at the bottom fight it amongst each other. That's what I got.
That some black people had been oppressors as well as oppressed. That wealth and status could corrupt regardless of race. That the boundaries between victim and perpetrator were never as clear as we wanted them to be. This truth was simply too uncomfortable for anyone to tell. The plantation houses crumbled. The records moldered in courthouse basements. The oral histories passed down through families became fragmentary and confused. By the mid-20th century, most Americans had never heard of Coin or the Metoyers, of William Ellison or Andrew Durnford. The forgotten story of black plantation owners had been buried so thoroughly that it seemed never to have existed at all. But nothing is ever truly forgotten. In dusty archives, the records waited. In crumbling cemeteries, the tombs...
And you know what? Rest in peace to the brother Steve Coakley. He dedicated his whole life to exposing the Boule, the Divine Nine, and the Freemasons. His whole theory in life and his whole thing in life, or I ain't gonna say his whole thing, but one of his major issues with these organizations were y'all know some secrets and y'all know some shit that can help benefit the masses and y'all not saying nothing. This is why Steve Coakley went as hard as he did on the Talented Tent, the Boule, the Divine Nine, and the Freemasons, because he understood that y'all the niggas that's keeping the secrets for the white boy, yet and still keeping us all down. That's why he beefed with them niggas so hard. Because he was like, he figured it out. Yeah, the white boy screwing us, but it's because of you niggas. So Steve Coakley's whole thing was, I'm about to attack you niggas because we know what the white boy doing, but the problem is the masses don't know that y'all know too, because y'all helping them. That's what Steve Coakley was on that whole time. That's why he couldn't stand them niggas. That's why he would expose them. When he'd see them in the street, he'll confront them. This nigga recorded himself confronting one of them Freemasons one time and straight up told him, you know what's up. He hated them niggas because he knew that they knew what was really going on and they were keeping it from the masses of the people. Rest in peace to Steve Coakley, bro. Rest in peace to the ancestor, man. That's crazy.
Stones held their secrets. Along the Cane River, Descendants of the Metoyers still lived on fragments of the land their ancestors had farmed. And slowly, carefully, historians began to piece together what had been lost. The story they uncovered challenges everything we think we know about race, wealth, and morality in American history. It forces us to ask whether freedom and justice are the same thing, whether escaping oppression absolves us of participating in it, whether wealth accumulated through evil means can ever be redeemed. These are not comfortable questions. They do not yield comfortable answers. But they are the questions that the forgotten black planters left behind, inscribed in deed records and court documents, in plantation ledgers and personal correspondence, in the very landscape of the American South. And their story is not over, because the mansions are still standing, the land is still there. The descendants still remember, however imperfectly, the strange and troubling legacy of their ancestors. The forgotten story is being remembered again, not to celebrate or condemn, but simply to understand. What comes next will reveal the full scope of what was lost and what might still be recovered. The Civil War did not simply end slavery. It destroyed a world, including the world of black slaveholders who had built their fortunes on its foundations.
And that's what the Civil War was about. Getting that money and getting that control. Because right after that, we got the 40-hour work week. Hello. We started paying taxes. Hello. Yeah, the Civil War was a gift that kept on giving. Yes, sir. All the things we know of that we hate today, all that came after the Civil War. Let me tell y'all something. All this shit be about money, yeah. All of this be about monions. I've been told y'all that, okay? And we starting to realize, first of all, there wasn't a lot of Africans in America, or at least in North America, because according to the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, they said only 300 and something thousand came to North America in total. That would mean that the majority of us were already here. Fast forward, when the clears started coming in, they started coming in through the East Coast, typically the Northeast. Some of them came in through Florida and all them other places, but typically through the East. When you look at the first 13 colonies, it was on the Northeast side. It wasn't until they purchased the Louisiana Purchase, which gave them Louisiana, New Orleans, all the way to the tippy top through damn near Canada. It wasn't until then, and they acquired the Mississippi River as well. It wasn't until then that they ran across all this land, this Royal River, aka the Mississippi River, and all these people. Well, maybe there was a system there where there was a slavery system. Either way, the majority of the slave owners in the South were black. Not because they were horrible people, but because the majority of the people in the South were black. So if that means that they had to have slavery that would mean if they had slavery in the South, then the majority of the people affected are going to be black, and the majority of the people who are doing the affecting are going to be what, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Black. Clears were not here by and large in the numbers you believe they are here in all this time. They just started flooding them in as much as they are now. So it makes sense why the North will go against the South and go into a civil war, because most of the people were either mulatto, people of color, or what, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Black. And all slavery wasn't Kunta Kinte. Just because you see slavery as a status or a title does not mean your person was beat, raped, killed, hung, or even put out in pastures and plantations for unruling hours, okay? Slavery was an economic and or working status as well, okay? It's no different from right now. We will be called E for employees. It's the same thing back then. You was an S for a slave, like in 2025, you were E for an employee. I'm not saying that the horrible things didn't happen during slavery. They absolutely did happen. There were people that were horrible. But that wasn't the majority of our story. The only way to find that is through what? Genealogy. You can sit up here and drag for each other. We can sit up here and go back and forth with the Africans. We can sit up here and say all of this and all of that. We could talk till we blue in the face. The only way to find out the real truth is through your own genealogy. Not nothing more, not nothing less. Now, y'all know I normally give y'all the video. Here's the video for y'all to go check out the rest of it because we're coming up on 2 hours and I don't want to make this too long. But the point of this video or the point of this live was to show you guys that we've been lied to about our history. We've been lied to about history, period. All our social studies books growing up made us seem like in the South, there was all a bunch of rich whites who ran the South. They were all plantation owners and a bunch of slave owners. And all the Negroes were downtrodden Africans with no language, no culture, no identity, no nothing, who didn't learn nothing. And all they did was kept their head down and work and get raped and killed and all that shit. That's the lie. That is the lie that was created to keep you mentally enslaved. If you believe you are a slave, then guess what? You are a slave. If you believe you came from slaves, then guess what? You're going to believe you a slave in 2025. And every time you try to fight something or go against something or try to fight for something for yourself, what is your brain going to tell you? Well, I can't because I'm a slave. They're going to do me like they did in Tulsa. They're going to whip me like they did in Roots. You get it? Please, y'all, do your own research. And please, if you're not asking why, you're doing yourself a disservice. Shout out to y'all in the building. Everything Asia. Is that how you say your name? Thank you so much for the super chat. It says, hey, Miss Boo, we were chatting via email. Can we please do a part 2? This is my kid-free weekend, and I have so much to add to this topic. I got you, Boo. Send me an email. Thank you so much. Connie Freeman, thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate you. And thank you again for the super chat. I appreciate you. Shout out to y'all in the building. I got to get up off of here. I did leave the video in the comments for y'all who want to go check it out. Make sure you do. And y'all, do not tell yourself that you're a slave. Find out your true history and go from there. Tell yourself who you really are. A lot of us come from a lot of guys and kings and queens. And I'm not even being all cliche about that woke shit, but it's the God's honest truth. We're not going to know it until we go do the genealogy and the research. Start on Ancestry.com, USCensus.gov, NationalArchives.com. Start with your family. Start with the person at your family who can start you in the right direction and then go to those places. With that being said, y'all, love y'all. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Happy Educational Friday. Teach one, each one, teach one. Peace.
Can you hear me now? Oh, let's go. It's your boy Big Chew, the voice of the beat. You know what I want? Blaze up. Come on, Blaze up.
It's the beat for me.
Wow, 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 wow. For your guy, for your B-O-Y. Drop it for your guy, for your B-O-Y. Do it for your guy, for your B-O-Y. Come on, baby, we are. For your boy. For your boy. Hustle for your boy. Fix it for your boy. Drop it for your, drop it for your. Lift it up.
Mr. Carroll, how you give the voodoo doll time to talk? I don't get no fucking time to talk.
Who the voodoo doll is?
The nigga you just had up here.